Today what I wanted to talk about was what happened to the Battleshock podcast and why it is now kind of a Battleshock YouTube channel. So when I began the Battleshock podcast, it was at a special time. It was right after the General's Handbook 1 was released for Age of Sigmar, which meant there weren't a lot of new Age of Sigmar podcasts. And a lot of the old Warhammer podcasts had either faded or changed their content. There's not a whole lot of podcasts that stuck with it. So, sensing a niche, I decided to throw my hat in the ring and see what I could add to the conversation. So I had fun doing it, but being a solo podcast is tough. I've only done in the past roundtable podcasts where I didn't have to carry the whole conversation myself. I didn't have to rely on just myself for ideas. It was something that could bounce off other people. So when it's just you, it's a lot of weight on your shoulders, and podcasting isn't light on the work. If you want to make your podcast sound good, it requires a good bit of editing. And that's time consuming, as anybody who podcasts will tell you. It's a lot easier just not to edit, but that usually sounds pretty terrible unless you are just the god king of radio production. So that's kind of the first reason, is it was a lot of work, and then the content kind of dried up. When 40K dropped, the AOS releases just disappeared. So even with the General's Handbook 2, there just wasn't a lot to talk about. At least from my end, I didn't want to do book reviews, so I kind of ran out of content, and I was playing less because I was playing some 40K, and I wouldn't say I was less interested in Age of Sigmar, but just not interested enough to come up with topics. So, which is one of the hardest part about podcasting, hardest parts. And the second reason is because, again, there weren't a lot of podcasts about Age of Sigmar when I started doing Battleshock, but that changed very quickly. I wasn't the only one that had the idea to start a podcast for Age of Sigmar when the General's Handbook dropped out. A lot of other people did, and so a whole bunch of new podcasts popped up. A lot of the older ones came back and made Age of Sigmar their thing again, and it was awesome. Still is. There's a ton of content out there, and honestly, a lot of them do better than I did. So I was happy with my results. I liked the podcasts I made, but for the effort I was putting in, my contribution to the community and to the conversation felt a little overshadowed, and not in a bad way, but I felt like others were doing it the same thing I was doing, only better. So why bother is what it boiled down to. I didn't really have a unique voice when it came down to a lot of it. I don't play it terribly competitively, and I like the narrative side of things, and there's less to talk about. There's a lot more to talk about if you focus on just competitive play and points and balance. You can look at 40K podcasts for that. I like that. I like everything, right? I like narrative, I like stories, I like points, I like it all. But that mishmash means I'm not terribly passionate about just one thing. And instead of bringing a lot to the table, I ran out of steam for stuff to talk about pretty quick that was different from everybody else. So the most successful thing I think I did was my campaign episodes, because the campaign was probably the most successful thing I've done with Age of Sigmar. There has been a lot of failure with stuff I've tried with Age of Sigmar, which is going to be an upcoming video, just about how I failed to launch a community and what that means, because you don't hear about it much. So also don't hear about failed podcasters much. Usually they just pod fade and go away. So like I said, I don't really feel like I'm a failure. It's hard to fail when you're just making free content for people, and I really appreciate all the emails and all the tweets and the communication I had with everybody. The community is fantastic, and the podcasting community is absolutely great, and there are some wonderful podcasts still out there, plenty of them in fact. So please explore all of those. I know Scrubby and Wells is hopefully still around. I haven't talked to Tyler in a while, and I know he's kind of been busy, so I'm hoping he comes back strong soon. But there's also Rolling Bad, there's Hewan Hammer, there's a ton of stuff out there. So just check it out on iTunes. It used to be just a few, now it's a whole bunch. So enjoy that. So why did I choose to do a video cast instead? Mainly because I haven't done it before. I've never tried anything like this, and I think the idea of carrying solo topics like this is a lot easier than doing like an hour show. I can put up 10 or 15 minute videos, or a whole lot less. And with what I'm planning to do the channel is to do a whole bunch of Warhammer content, but also mix in other things I like. Video games, tabletop RPGs, tabletop board games, all kinds of stuff. a mishmash of nerdery, if you will. So expect that. I also really want to do battle reports, but on top of everything else that's been going on, I've had a lot of life changes recently. One is that I'm a new dad, yay, for the first time. So I'm very excited about that, and that's taken up most of my time. So I don't get out to play like I used to at all, but I'm working on getting my table set up at my new house, because I also moved right around the same time we adopted the baby, so it's been a little nuts. So that's over there in this in my studio or basement down here. And hopefully I'll get that, once I get my table set up, I can have folks over and can do some battle reports. I think that would be fun to do. I've been watching battle reports for years, and I think that there's a lot of different cool styles and stuff I'd like to try. And again, there's a big Age of Sigmar niche, because there aren't a lot of people who do Age of Sigmar battle reports. There are a few, but it's certainly not as many as 40K, so maybe I do have something to say. Maybe I can throw my hat in the ring there. So we'll try it out. It's kind of an experiment, and it's been fun so far. Hopefully it'll continue to be fun, and if it stops, just like with the podcast, I'll probably just stop it. So that's what happened to Battleshock, and that's why Battleshock is now a YouTube channel instead of just a podcast. We'll see where it goes. So I'm very open to suggestions. What do you guys want to see? What do you want to hear? I really would like to kind of get out in the community here locally, beyond just the wargaming community. We have a lot of board game producers here. The folks who do Sentinels in the Multiverse, the guys who do Scythe. There's a bunch of, I think Trollforge Miniatures is local to the part of St. Louis I just moved to, which is a miniature production company. It'd be fun to talk to those guys and kind of get their local thoughts on things. So I don't know. We'll see what happens, but expect hopefully more content than I was doing with the podcast, because these are a lot easier to do since I just have to kind of flip the camera on and not stumble through words, which is hard sometimes. I might end up doing a script out of these. I might end up just doing them off the cuff. We're going to see what feels right as I move forward. But again, please feel free to add your stuff in the comments. Also, do the whole like and subscribe thing. That'd be awesome. Either way, I'll be putting out some more videos here soon for y'all to enjoy. If you have any other questions about the podcast or anything else, just hit me up. Anyway, I'll catch y'all later. Take care easy.